We're starting with session 10. Jim, I think there was yesterday there was a question from Sao Paulo, right?
Yes.
So the brother they describe him as depressed, went into a mental hospital, I presume.
Hospital of some sort.
And she is wondering what she can do. Well, I need to say right up front, I'm not an expert in this. There are people who are really very well trained and have lots of experience. I had it a few times in my life that somebody committed suicide. And it's the battle that you may experience. I'm just giving some thoughts, but some of you may know much more than I do about this. Is that in the Tibetan Buddhist teachings there's a guideline, and that is to never give up in a situation like that. But that doesn't mean that you need to pull and push this person. And it is more internally that you don't give up. I don't know if you had this in your environment, but if it's going on for a while, at some point there's something maybe in some of us, in the mind, it wasn't mine, that I gave up. Well, if that's really what you want to be doing, then there's nothing else I can do. As if there's a greater power than this person's ability to resist, or as if there's something bigger in this person that makes him or her come to do a thing like that. Anyway, I don't need to speak about how devastating it is for everybody and how guilt arousing it is for the parents especially, or maybe partners or friends even. So it's also, we talked about this morning, a situation like that, that sometimes somebody ends their life and we had no idea that they were in the situation they were in. And that is difficult for us too. If a friend of mine would do it and I had no idea, what does that say about our friendship is our first thought. But this goes much, much, much deeper than friendships can reach. To put yourself, I'm looking at somebody who was talking about that this morning. So to put yourself in a position where the friendship, if the friendship was really as you thought it was, then this would have come up. It may not. It may not because it was on the spur of the moment, very quickly. Oh yeah, I have to leave time for translating. Just translated, I don't know much about it. So, but those thoughts that, apparently the friendship wasn't deep enough, all these kind of discussions that you have with yourself, they need to stop. It is not about, of course we have emotions, so you need to deal with that, but like in this situation, the person matters the most. And the only advice that I can give is the suggestion to not give up internally and to chant mantras. I'm a little bit hesitant to say that because people who don't chant mantras, they may have all kinds of thought about them, and people who do chant mantras, they think it is an all cure. And the impact of a mantra can be felt and can be seen at times, but also at other times not. So to give up any other effort and say, well, I just chant for this person, that's too limited a point of view too. So every situation is different. I don't think there's one guideline. So I better stop talking because I don't know how to deal with it, except for when we are in it, to not give up and not have this person find out that you are worrying. That is really very important, because then they have another burden. You know, that's not a reason necessarily to stay. All right, so yeah.
If you really accept it, it's something in the life of somebody, and it's...
Are you talking from experience?
A way to die? No.
Then we shouldn't talk about... You can talk about you, but if it's not happening in your life, I don't think we should talk. It's theory. Try again, sorry.
So, what was coming up in me, can you talk with this person about dying, like we are talking about dying?
Yeah, you can try anything, as long as you don't worry.
Okay.
Sorry, I was a little too quick, but I'm hesitant to have general statements, especially about suicide. You know, when you're in that situation, there is no recipe for dealing with it. So if at that moment you feel to talk about dying, you know what the Tibetan Buddhists would say is, but please do not ever quote me on this, huh? With respect to a person who's thinking about suicide. Do not ever quote me. But Tibetan Buddhism would say, number one, how do you know it's getting better afterwards? And the second thing they will say, it's going to get much worse afterwards. We cannot say that because we don't have that knowledge. You cannot say, well, I read that in a book that. But if maybe in one case it might be okay to say, how do you know it's getting better? This is a little bit the same as, I'm going a little bit ahead of my schedule here, but it's the same of saying, oh, it's so nice the person is not suffering anymore. She's dead, but at least she is not suffering anymore. We really don't know that. It's an okay language to use with each other. If that gives people peace of mind, then you can say that, but we don't know if it's getting better. Tibetan Buddhist says maybe not. So these sessions we talk a little bit alternating between the process of dying and how to be with a person. Sorry, I was a little too quick. So I'm just jumping in the middle. We already have two sessions talking about this. I'm jumping in a little bit in the middle. Is at the moment of dying, the person's senses begin to diminish. And it's harder to hear, it's harder to see, and it will stop. That by itself could be already very scary. But what I also mentioned already is that the mind is also withdrawing from what it has been engaged in up to now. So in friendships, in family, in environment, the place where you lived, there's a lot of your energy in that place. Or in the routine of living there, or all the pots and pans and the bric and brac that you purchased and you put there, there's a lot of energy. And your inheritance, they like to get some of those things because it has your energy in it. So you have to imagine as if the things, let's do the people second, but the things where you live, as if the energy that you put in it, as if it begins to recede, as if it becomes to leave the objects. Is that clear described? And then it's the same with friends and family and partners and people and past. So wherever your energy has been put into in life will begin to recede. Recede is terugtrekken, geloof ik in het Nederlands. So that means that the dying person will experience much more energy because it's not in things and people anymore. And that's one of the reasons why the Tibetan Buddhists value that moment so much, is because you begin to experience mind without being attached to anything. So usually when we talk about attachment, we think of people we are attached to, but this is a different kind of attachment. This is your energy has been attached to, joined. That kind of attachment, when the Tibetan Buddhism teaching says, I'm going to make it shorter every time, I'm going to say now teaching. When this teaching say no attachment, it is to not attach to what you see and what you hear and what you feel. It's not just people or a country or your house. It's the energy that you put in it. When they say no attachment, they suggest do not put your energy in it, because your energy will then be quote unquote less. And that's not so bad, but what is problematic is that your energy then is withdrawing from everything else. That's why attachment is not advisable, because you will not have exposure to, you will not have awareness anymore for everything else than this object that you have put your energy into. So that is the idea of attachment. Now there's a psychological side effect of it, is that whatever you attach to, especially people, they will feel trapped unless they are of the support attachment group, which means that your real love is the more attached you are, the more you love the other person. So we are encouraged to become less attached because we have more access to everything else, and that person will feel freer. But at the time of death, the attachment is, wherever it is, it must be maybe shown in a movie one of these days. Like you have a very special cloth that you value very much, like a tablecloth. So the tablecloth is lying on the table, and as if the energy that you put into it is coming back to you. So the tablecloth will just be empty. Certainly doesn't seem to have any substance of it. Now that process is problematic. That's ideally that whatever we are attached to is coming back to us. If it isn't, you can imagine what a difficulty it is to let go, because you're still stapled to, stitched to, we say in Dutch. You still have, your energy is still attached to all these things and people. So you know it has to come loose, because you're going to go and you're going to take all of that energy with you. It cannot stay behind it. You cannot leave until you all got it wrapped up under your arm and you are ready to go. That process is very painful, and it is not only with external objects, it's also with experiences in our energetic body. So the person who is dying, more and more, we're already on the 4th day or something, more and more I can only use the language of Tibetan Buddhism, because one, that's the only one I know, and two, there might not be anyone so easily accessible. Maybe there is. But so it is not proprietary of Tibetan Buddhism. So you don't need to be a Buddhist to appreciate that. But at some point we need to use that language, because they have detailedly described this whole process. So as your energy is withdrawing, it needs to come all the way to you. If it does, then the moment of dying, you will experience the mind to its fullest. And that's what the Tibetan Buddhist wants. That moment is the biggest moment of life, because you will experience yourself, mind, and life, I don't know, bigger than that, in its fullest form. Your potential will be fully manifested, which makes sense because it's not somewhere else. So your energy is not there, but here. If it's all here, then it will flourish, the same as a flower. A flower tries to bloom, and so it puts all its energy that it can get from everywhere and to put it in the flourishing of the seed. We don't do that. We park our energy in here and in there and in there, And then we think that is, you know, the way of living that we have learned, and that may be the most intimate one. According to these teachings, it's really not. It's not intimate because it's colored by the attachment and by the way it has been attached, the motivation of the attachment, the motivation that the energy went into the tablecloth or a relationship or whatever it is. So I'm trying to describe now a few times, all the time, the same thing. There's this hugely dramatic moment that all the energy that was spread out and in the body with memories, the sibling, the brother that you have a hard time with for so many years, that is not only associated to this person who lives somewhere, it's in your body. There is a blockage that when this person's name is mentioned, you feel tight. You feel tight. So in our teachings, you want to find out what makes you tight so that you can begin to release it. When you die, everything that tends to contract you will begin to, it has to release. And I don't know about delivery of a baby, but you know, it is going to happen. Yeah, when the baby is coming, you cannot say, I go back anymore. I changed my mind. And it's the same with dying. It is going to happen. So it's not like, well, if you don't let go, you're going to live 200 years. No, you are. But how painful is it? That's one. And how much is there the situation that you can indeed experience this moment in which everything that you were attached to drops. So you can experience yourself to your fullest. That's the goal of a Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhist. The goal is to experience yourself to the fullest. They call that Buddha nature. At that moment you discover that you are what the Buddha has manifested. So you want to learn what the Buddha has manifested, not because you suddenly are interested in Buddhism or you're becoming a Buddhist, but because there is an example who describes this process of disassociating, disengaging, without losing interest in life, without not becoming careless or disinterested or indifferent. The more, that's what they say, and that's of course the benefit that you get, the more you disengage, the more love you feel, because it is not cluttered over. Cluttered, I don't know what that is. Huh?
Obscured.
Obscured. So as we're dying, the energy has to withdraw. The more attached we are, the more blocked we are in our energy system, the more upsetting it is. Now, if it's very painful, there is pain management. By the way, I cannot say that enough. Somebody who has a lot of pain, if you are having less pain, you didn't lead a better life than the person who has a lot of pain. Huh? That's very important. When a person has a lot of pain, don't say, well, eigen schuld, dikke bult. That's your own, you did that. It's not true at all. Because the pain that person has is conditioned and has been going on for a long time. You just embody it, but it's not like something you did or did not do. So to think about it that it is your fault would really be completely the wrong entrance to this. You accept it and now you're learning to release, releasing. So in that process, whatever has happened likely appears itself. Some people say that when you're dying, your life is passing by in a flash of a second. Now that's a very interesting statement. How can you have your whole life, 85 years, in a tenth of a second? That's interesting, but what's much more interesting, whatever happened in that life will present itself. So you want to clear as much as possible before you die, because it will present itself in one way or the other. tomorrow we will go back to this topic, because what is presenting itself, the Tibetans have given a very precise map for it, and that's the 6 realms of existence and wheel of life. We work with that tomorrow. As long as we are open to the idea that when we die, all of this may come. By the way, nobody dies like this, huh? It's like it could be a second, it could be a long time, but it will give you an idea of what the dying person is going through, and, of course, what we will go through. So number 1 is to try to create the conditions for this very important moment. The Tibetans say that whatever happens after life is greatly affected by what happened in this life. Now, you don't have to believe in a next life, but what we do today has an impact on how we feel tomorrow. There's no difference between those two, a next life or a next day. If you begin to see that tomorrow is the same as a next life, now it becomes interesting. Now you can learn what they say about next life, because it's tomorrow. In a way, we're going through the process of dying when we fall asleep. Then we're dreaming, it's the bardo of in between, and then when we wake up, there's a rebirth. And likely, if you don't do something about it, your next morning you're probably dealing with stuff from the previous day. Certainly your perspective on things are still the same, likely, unless you did something. Coffee alone is not enough. It helps, but not enough. Yeah.
But when we go to sleep and wake up, we are in the same body.
Says who? I've never used that. Rinpoche uses it all the time, but I've never used. But this is a good moment. Right?
Very good.
Many people are not in their body. Have you not seen sometimes people in the morning, it's like one eye is kind of crooked before they drink coffee? Have you seen that? They haven't landed yet. So no, we're not necessarily in the body. Have you ever, there are people who dream that they're sleeping and they see their body lying down there. You know? So we're not in the body. Was that your real biggest question?
Just if you follow that body, mind disconnect with energy, with
Yeah.
life, what is leaving
Yeah,
the moment of death,
yeah,
then where comes that what we did, like what we call karma, what we
Yeah.
did in our life, how that goes.
yeah. How come we wake up in the morning? No, I don't know if that's interesting to people, but for me it's a very interesting question. What's that process that wakes up again? So a few more minutes and then we do some practice that is related to this. So where we are now is we're talking about a person who is dying. What can the person do to prepare now? Because at that time you don't want to hear any of these suggestions, and you don't have the capacity or the patience or the insight or the capacity to do that. Maybe different for somebody else. You know, now the urgency is so great that you can learn very, very quickly. But we want to prepare for that stage. Why? Because it's such a huge moment, and it is the best possible moment, Tibetans say, to decide what is coming next. I skip a beat. That moment is very important because that moment is the moment supreme where you can really come face to face with your own nature. And the Buddhist says that is Buddha nature. You are complete as you are. There is nothing missing. And if we can relate that back to our daily life, if we already can have that experience now, we will not lose so much time between now and then. And this is on Roman numeral page 17 in The Joy of Being. We are complete as we are nothing missing. Now we say that's not true, but at the moment of dying, that is the experience if we are able to contact the light that will appear, because the mind is now at full moon, totally open. So the moment of death for the Tibetan Buddhists is a great moment if they haven't reached that point yet during daily life, during the life before. It's not that you can only get it when you die. You can do it now. That's what they all practice for, is to experience yourself uninhibited, unlimited, full, the full presence of yourself. That's what they're practicing. They call it complete human being. They call it Buddha nature, or inner realization of inner potential. So, number one is that we're trying to prepare for the state where the attachment becomes a major obstacle. Can we learn to not be attached? When I say it like that, it's a very moralistic thing. You shouldn't be attached. But this is very different. You lose out, we lose out by putting all our energy into one thing or two things or three things. Because we lose contact with everything else. When you're attached to one thing, you lose contact with everything else. So all the opportunities that would give we are cut off from it. And what you're attached to has to detach anyway, and the object or person that you're attached to, it's not the best thing for that person to be so held captive. So that's number one. And number two is it possible, number two is, at the time of dying and the energy is withdrawing, it is sometimes very difficult, both in the body and from people. So what can we do now, apart from attachment? How can we deal now with releasing the tension that has been associated with how we have been living? So what is our point of view of life? How have we acted? How have we spoken? How have we thought? That will all make it easier or more difficult to leave this body. And the Tibetans have a system for that, and it's the wheel of life, and we'll do that tomorrow. Now the third thing, I just repeat it so I can move on. The third aspect is that the Tibetan Buddhists suggest that at some point in that process, you want to confess what you have done knowingly or unknowingly that has undermined other people or undermined yourself or contracted you or contracted others. So could you have a sense of your actions and your words and your kind of thoughts that were negative? You can say were violent or negative. So do you already know, are there some kind of secret thoughts that you have that put other people down? I remember when I just started to teach, and it lasted quite a while, when I just started to lead classes, I was glad if the other teachers were not so good. You know that feeling? Because if they're not so good, then I'm kind of safe. Can you imagine? I can, I did. It's a big shift to be really happy when people like another teacher. It's a big shift. So if I'm just walking around until I die with wishing that other teachers were not so good, that comes back in your face. And this is just one seemingly harmless one, but it is a harmful thought. I'm undermining the other person. So if you know that, can you during your life begin to change and enjoy that people like the teaching and that that person knows how to present the teachings that speak to people? Yeah.
Would I also care about deeds that I did to myself as much as
Oh yes, yes, yes.
I can give them?
Some of us is everything to ourselves and others is only to other people. So yeah, there's a moment of confession. These teachings say, I'm a little tired to say that all the time because everything I say is DT, but it's kind of to give you the freedom to have your own thoughts about this. That's why I do it. So these teachings suggest that confession should not be to the person who you did it to. If you somehow processed this confessing, the person will notice. Of course you can go to the person and say, I'm very sorry what I did, of course. But what's really at stake is the attitude, the mindset that does that. So by just saying it to that person doesn't liberate you from that pattern. But yes, of course it's appropriate to go to that person. But what I said the other day already, I sometimes get emails and a few times I got phone calls at 11 o'clock at night because people have confession seminars and then they have to deal with whoever they have to deal with. And if I'm on their list, they call me to try to clear it up. But I want to sleep. I don't know what they're talking about. I don't even remember what happened sometimes. So don't think that if you give your excuses to somebody, that then you're off the hook. It's the attitude. So that is, of course you can say, I'm sorry, of course. But it's the attitude that somehow we need to get an understanding of. That understanding is never associated with guilt because that attitude, that pattern, there was never a time that you consciously chose that. I'm going to be like that. If that were the case, yeah, then you need a few extra rounds of confession. But if these patterns come automatically, they are there without, it doesn't matter how they came there. If it's through the family setting, through the country, you have been affected by this or that. It might be underground in some countries for 200-300 years. In other countries it might be right at the surface of everything. So don't think that you are personally a bad person because you have those thoughts. That is really critical. Can you confess without being a bad person?
Could you think of any method or anything that could help me to remember these things? Because I find I often...
Oh, there's a very nice formula. Every suffering I've caused knowingly or unknowingly. I know it's easy to say that, but it is the unknowingly that is... Everybody will be telling you, or anyway, in my case, everybody's ready to tell me what I did wrong. But did I do it myself? I don't know. I did, but I'm not necessarily knowing it. So at some point, it's good to listen to other people, but be careful with that too. You know, they have an agenda too. So it is helpful, but if it gets bigger, something is wrong. If somebody helps you acknowledging it, it should be done in a way that it gets less, that you can relax in it, not to feel more guilty. And usually when we help others like this or give feedback, we make it worse. So important is that whatever comes automatically to mind is usually not something you've chosen consciously. But we are responsible for it because it's in your bolleke kates, it's in your head. So to create the conditions, and I'll do one more and then we go on. Creating the conditions is the attachment, is to realize the energy will withdraw. Whatever attachment there was will present itself. To confess, in these teachings you confess to a teacher or a spiritual friend. you can also confess it to yourself. That's really in this process, what I'm talking about now, is what really matters. Can you confess it to yourself? I am doing this knowingly or unknowingly, so that you are a witness of it. It doesn't make you a bad person. If you make that switch that it makes you a bad person, something isn't right. You're not doing it right. I am not doing it right if I feel guilty that I did it. I need to confess it, and I'm very sorry for the pain it has caused. And then you can do whatever to repair the damage. But repairing is not feeling bad about yourself, it's not repairing the damage. And then finally, it's not finally, tomorrow more, or later tonight, and this people are going to, going to react to. In these teachings, they suggest you die alone. Wait a minute, I want to hold my hand or have somebody. So people think that holding somebody's hand, that's the ultimate of love. It may not be the case. Some people, yes, some people, no. Some people who are dying, they are so sensitive that even coming close within 5 meters is already painful for them. So do not think that a dying person likes to be held hands. No, it's totally different from one person to the other. So you need to have experience with this, so you know that your agenda, your idea, it doesn't matter and can be harmful. So some of you have heard this a few times before, but the most striking example for me was a young person. She was very terminally ill, meaning death was coming for sure very soon, and I visited her. And when I entered the room in which she was in bed, when I entered the room, it's about a quarter of this room. It's a large room, but about a quarter. When I entered into the door, I felt something that made me stop. And then she said, stay there. So what happens is the dying person's kum is expanding. When you leave the body, the kum is expanding, which is one reason why this moment is so important. Because the kum can become so large, can become infinite. So when I was entering the room, if I would have come closer, I would have really violated her. Whereas if we don't know this kind of sensitivity, you walk in and you go sit on the bed and you hold hand, that she might have experienced your touch as fire. So sensitive, so burning. And to me, it doesn't matter. One person has that and another doesn't. Some people who die, they love if you hold their hands. But don't come in with the idea, but we do that in the next session, that the ideal way is that you hold hands and you stay there. No, the Tibetans say, ideally, you are alone. Many people find a way to die alone. The family is around, family is here and there, and suddenly, person is gone. At night, or when you take a break, So we're going to talk about what to do in this situation, a person who's with the dying person, but if we stay with the dying person, the Tibetans say it's the best to die alone. And they usually use examples of yogis, and we say, well, we are not yogis, so it doesn't apply to us. But if you would know that the people who are with you, they are not neutral, unless it's a hospice person, maybe, a nurse, maybe, a doctor, maybe. But the family is not open and neutral. They have some attitude about it. They may be worrying or anxious or mourning. That is a burden for the dying person. So if you know that your attitude affects the dying person, you want to be clear, but we'll do that in the next session, what your attitude is. So the dying is not only because we are born alone and we die alone. It's not that simple. It's also because whatever we surround the dying person can really make it difficult or easy. It's very difficult to leave if the people say, I will miss you, I will miss you, I will miss you. That person, like we said the other day, it's like one foot is in the bus and the other foot is still on the pavement and the bus is leaving. And you are kind of in between the door and your one leg is on the ground and the other one is here. They want to hold you. If they don't, then they really want to kick you out. It's time for you to go, you know. So ideally, we have a neutral position. Death is certain, it's happening now. The only thing that the dying person needs to know is death is happening. All right. Yeah.
Would you say if I'm getting emotional, I just imagine being with my mom dying, for example. So
Well, you start imagining that already? Yeah, but this is not necessary. You may not. You may get something from this retreat, from a next retreat. You may not be emotional when your mother is dying.
But if I should rather leave
You're still doing it? You may not. There's a lot of happening between she dies and now. You may not at all. You'd be surprised that we are very different when somebody who we're close to is dying. Like, you must have noticed this, like you are nervous about something and you have to take care of a small kid and you're not nervous anymore, right? You're going to I don't dare to walk in the forest by myself. That's why I go with Andy and Jim. It's very dark in the Ratnaling in the middle of the night. You see nothing. But if I would go with a 5-year-old boy or girl, I'm not afraid. I don't know how that happens. So there's no need now to start thinking about how you will feel when your mother dies. I completely forgot that they are translating this. Would you once in a while remind me, translation? So, as we are progressing, you will hear me say more and more that Kumne can be a very, very good way to learn this process that we have to go through when we are dying. So there's an exercise in Kumne dancing, and Rinpoche casually says in the text, we're not holding on to anything, I'm not holding on to anything, and nothing is holding on to me. Usually people like that sentence, but not when it comes to it. And it's challenging because we think if we're holding on, that is how we express love. By holding on, we express love. To be detached cannot possibly be a loving attitude. Well, the reason why it can be is because being attached, the focus is very narrow. It's almost linear. So whatever happens outside, you're not picking up. So your helpfulness, your being there for other people is very limited. So of course you become afraid to lose it. Fear has much to do with losing ground in the process of dying or beginning to detach. Feeling attached, that gives a sense of security. It's like an anchor, and it is an anchor. Okay, Andy, shall we? So we go to 7 in Kumne dancing. We will do Kumne dancing number 7 and 15 and maybe 16. So 7 is sitting down. I know you want to stand up, huh? But 7, it's sitting down. So if you cannot do that, just come along as much as you can. So sit on your side. We're not training in Kumne dancing here. Just copy Andy. You sit on your left. Your left leg is bent. Your right knee is up. Your right foot is in 90 degree with your left ankle, and your left hand is supporting you with the fingers pointing sideways. Can you please not talk? It's a little bit difficult. Is the posture clear? Now, we're going to do it on the other side. And for Andy, who knows how to do it, and he's smart, he's on the parquet, and you are not, and you don't know how to do it, so you want to show how you toe to the other side?
First we do this.
Yeah, and then, not yet, just... So where you are is not so easy. But you can find your way, right? You will be okay. You don't need to sit on the parquet. You don't need to be Andy. Okay, so we're sitting to the left, the other side. So your left hand is pointing to the left, your right hand is right in front of you with the fingers pointing forward. So in these teachings, this little sentence is super important. There is no need to control this posture. In daily life, you want to become aware, are you holding anywhere? When you walk, it's not an emotion or anything, there's a holding, as if you are permanently on guard to protect yourself, or something wrong might happen. So in Kumne we can learn that there's no need to control ourselves, because we are not going into focusing on the physical body, we're focusing on the fluid energy is manifesting a new shape. So energy taking on shapes, that's what we're doing. So there's no need to control this posture. There's nothing, you are not holding on to anything, and nothing is holding on to you. This seems to be the most lonely thing to do, but it is also the most freeing. You're not holding on to anything, and nothing is holding on to you. Something else will come in its place. Okay, now stretch the right leg as much as you can. Ideally there's a straight line, but for many of us it will not be. Curl the right toes towards the face and hold on to your leg wherever you can. If you can, you hold it to the lower leg. So of course, there's a kind of controlling going on, but can you imagine that at some point with some practice, what you're controlling now, that will drop away. Okay, let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4. Coming down. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Coming up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1. Okay, now silently counting. 1, 2, 4. 1, 2, 3. And again. See, everything seems to be controlling, but eventually it will not. There's just movement. Energy body is taking shapes in space. 1. There needs to be 4 counts going down. 4 up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. You need to count silently. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Last time, coming up. Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now take your time to go to the other side. Eventually you will be able to do it in 4 counts. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4. Stretching. 1, 4. Last time. And just wherever you sit in a more normal position, and the legs underneath you if you can, just for a moment. So in Kumne dancing, our energetic body, our energy body is taking on shapes and forms. It's very pliable, malleable. The energy body takes on the form of the mindset. So if you change the energy body, the mindset begins to loosen up. And you can decide what mindset you want to take on, and your energetic body will begin to display it. So after 5 minutes of Kumne dancing, you may already experience that your mind is not anywhere. Some of you may think of something, but for most of us it's already not anywhere anymore, it's here. So the mind is in the body, but the mind is not only not traveling, but it's not attaching itself anywhere. You begin to feel what it's like. When mind is not attached to something, somebody. So it takes 5 minutes for most of us to experience that. Let's get up. There's no instruction needed, just do Kumne dancing and the mind will disengage because it becomes completely integrated with space and the energy body. We're going to do 15. So as you bend your knees, your arms come forward with the palms down. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Come forward, straighten the legs, upper body straight, horizontal, hands down, the top of the hand forward. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I'm 4 coming up. 1, 2, 3, 4. When you're at 2, it's always at the heart level. Whenever there's half or the whole is at the heart level. If you would do 2 times 4, then after the first 4, you're at the heart level. We do 1 times 4, so after 2. So now we're going to pose 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All there is energy shaping. 3, 4 coming up. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Wide open eyes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Coming in pose 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. One, 2, 3, 4. Rinpoche calls that leaving the corral we have created for ourselves. A corral is what horses and cows are in. There's a meadow with a fence around it. That's called corral. A rigid way of thinking and acting, and 3 or 4 attitudinals. And that sums us up. 3 kinds of responses. Always predictable, not pragmatic, but dogmatic. So we're leaving that structure. Its energetic rigidity becomes loose. There's no psychological step involved that you need to do 1, 2, 3. All you do is this. Because the energy that has 2 or 3 patterns leaves the corral, is free. And you see it's vertical. Sky comes down, earthy. Now horizontal. There's not much else. Sky, earth, and its interaction in between. Last time. And the arms go forward and down while you stay in the position, upright position. So maybe a few exceptions. Your mind is not going anywhere. Right? This is not attaching itself to something. It's staying in space, in energy, because energy and space have united. We go to 16, the last one. Interlock the fingers. That is the look at the example. You lock the tips of the fingers. Feel this position. It's in front of the heart. So it accumulates everything into. Starts with the heart. Now going up in 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4. You need to take all the 4 counts, and then back to the other side. 1, 2, the middle. 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then in 2 back, and in 2 forward. So we'll do that again. Just if you're not sure, look at Andy now. This is the position you're in. So now we come up in 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. To the side in 4. Take the whole time to go to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2 to the center. 3, 4. Hold. Now back to the center in 2 and 2 forward, horizontal. Hold. And up. Last time. And unfolding. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the mind is not only not attaching outside, but inside, for most of us, probably not much. Not to a thought or to something. Maybe a thought is passing, but you're still, alertness, ready. Let's sit down. And if you're comfortable to do that, I propose you close your eyes. So whatever you're going to hear, just follow. Do not make up your own exercise. So as the mind is in the body, do you notice a wide openness around you? You can imagine it. Rinpoche would describe beyond all mental activity, there may be an entire different reality. A fundamental openness. Imagine that you can go in there. So as if you are mental activity, you're going through it, and you enter this blue, if it's dark is okay too, but let's say blue, into this openness. And you keep going into the light openness, or dark, whatever it is, into the openness. You're going far. Keep going. Deep into fundamental openness. And begin to slow down. You're way out in openness. And when you look back, you see way in the distance, you see the earth. You're so far into space that in the process you also have left not only the mental world, but the whole physical world. So if you look back, you see way in the distance the earth. So turn around and begin to go towards the earth. Not fast, not like a rocket. You go towards the earth. And gradually the earth is becoming larger because you're coming closer. And no manipulation whatsoever, just go closer and closer. and somewhere on the earth you land, you arrive on land. Could be any continent, anywhere. And when you land, you discover that it is 500 years ago. You have made a time travel and you landed 500 years ago. Now, as you're witnessing this, what are you going to do there? What is your activity? You don't make it up anything. Just see, maybe nothing. Maybe you find yourself in a specific situation in which you start doing. There's no mental direction. If nothing happens, it's fine too. Whatever you're doing 500 years ago, is there any similarity to what you're doing, how you're doing what you're doing now? But stay 500 years ago, but is there something familiar about how you're doing what you're doing? Or are you really doing it in a very different way? Now, from 500 years ago, from that position where you are, that situation, can you look at 2018, like in the future, you see 500 years from then, and you see yourself? So from 500 years ago, you're looking at now, and you're telling you, do you know you're going to die? You're going to die. Tell yourself, from 500 years ago, seeing yourself now, tell yourself, you're going to die. Feel your hands and gently open your eyes. Not moving, please, just very still. So let's have a break. I would propose that for some people it might be very nice to share a little bit what happened. But I would like to ask you to only talk about the exercise and not about anything else.
Om Mani Padme Hum Re. Om Mani Padme Hum Re. Om Mani Padme Hum Re. Om Mani Padme